Hello, everyone. My name is Andre, and welcome to the PDHPE Pulse podcast. Today, I am joined with Roset Khair. Roset, how are you today on this beautiful day?
I am good. I'm good. The weekend's looming, so life is good.
Oh, we're so close, and I can see the sun is out. It's going to be a good one. Just to give you a bit of background on Roset, I'm actually really excited to have her on the show. We've spoken in the past, and we had a quick chat before. And after we spoke, I just thought, got to get her on. She's absolutely incredible. So Roset is the financial education manager at the Ecstra Foundation. She works with various educational organizations, including professional associations, not-for-profit, government, and schools to improve financial capability. Roset started her career in corporate banking before moving to education, where she worked in the public and independent sector for over 14 years. She's certainly done her time in education, and that's also inclusive of leadership, which is fantastic. She currently teaches at UNSW as part of a master's teaching degree in the area of financial literacy education. She has also designed and written many of the financial literacy materials used in schools around financial literacy, including the ASX Schools Share Market Game and Financial Basics Foundations. Roset is also Vice President of Economics and Business Educators of New South Wales, where she has been a director for 9 years and is the New South Wales affiliate of Business Educators Australasia. Roset, you have an incredible resume. Oh my gosh. It's a privilege to have you on the show and with such a wealth of experience, particularly in this area of gambling with teenagers and young people. It's such an interesting space. Can you tell me a bit about your work at the Ecstra Foundation and what led you to do research in gambling and gambling harms?
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction, Andre. I kind of fell into researching a bit more about gambling harms through my work with Ecstra Foundation. So just to give you a bit of a background on Ecstra Foundation, we're a not-for-profit organisation, and we invest in partnership programs and we help people better understand their financial capability. So that, of course, equals financial literacy. So we offer lots of support to different organisations. And one of the things that we provide is the Talk Money program. And I'll talk a bit more about that a bit later on. But the Talk Money program basically is a program that we offer through schools. So to schools all around Australia, so remote, rural. So far, we've run it for several years, and so far we've run 14,551 workshops across Australia to 1,697 schools, and we've reached almost 600,000 students as part of our workshops. Wow. So that's wild. Yeah, it is absolutely wild. And we run several workshops, and our workshops are really there to get our young people to think about how they manage money and to give them confidence at key stages in their life. So we have 4 different programs that we offer. We've got the Talk About Money program, which is for year 5 to 6. So I know you teach the younger years, and this might be something that you might be interested in personally. And in the Talk About Money program, we talk about having money conversations, about creating saving habits, and talking about wants and needs, because that's the foundational aspects of understanding money. We then offer spending and saving workshops. So those are 2 workshops as well, on spending and saving choices, commercial influences. So how do you resist the urge to buy when, the marketing is there trying to draw you in, but also setting financial goals for yourself. And then we've got a year 9 to 10 program, which is about making money work. We do also offer this one for year 11 and year 12. It fits beautifully with that as well. But this one's about making how to make money and going into the workforce. We talk about tax and super, work rights, and having financial independence, and it's really at a key time when young people are getting their first jobs, and they need to know their rights so that they're protected. So we talk a lot about fair work and those types of things. So things they absolutely need to know to protect themselves. And then we've got another workshop, and this one's a single one, and it's on becoming scam savvy. So how do you protect yourself from scams that are out there? Because young people are unfortunately one of the most targeted demographics when it comes to scams. And we look at the different types of scams out there, how to respond to them if you have been scammed, because of course there's a lot of wellbeing issues associated with that. And then if you are scammed, how do you seek help, and urgent help? Because quite often it goes beyond just losing money. There's sometimes a strong psychological burden and emotional burden associated with that. So we want to protect our young people as much as possible. All our workshops are for free. So, schools can book those in, and we organise a time that works for you. I will provide a link maybe at the end
Absolutely,
if teachers want to book in for those. We do have a lot of PDHPE teachers that actually book us in as part of their wellbeing programs that you run in schools. So they align really beautifully with that. We also offer some fact sheets and lessons that teachers can use within the classroom. And a couple of those fact sheets that are coming out, one will be on gambling harm, so understanding gambling, and also some lessons around that. But then we go a little bit deeper, and we also have a fact sheet coming out on scambling and, other types of gambling that we're starting to see more often. So, really trying to think broadly about what our young people need. But then, of course, we've got some of the other ones that deal with, like cryptocurrency, for example, which both teachers and students might not have a lot of understanding about, especially to do with the risks, because we do see a lot of young people taking those risks when it comes to their money. And I know that's an important part of PDHPE, being able to make wise decisions around risks. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So absolutely. That's where when I was actually reviewing several of the sessions that we run, the Talk Money programs, just about every single one of the sessions at varying age groups. So I review all of them on a regular basis, and students kept asking questions about gambling and about gaming and Roblox and loot boxes and things like that. And I thought, this is a bit interesting. Like, it's not just a one-off. Like, our young people are actually facing things that our generation, or even the generation after us, haven't really faced. And we've come to a really unusual situation where they seem to be bombarded by gambling influences. And my research started looking at what can we do to protect them, and a lot of it, and we'll have a look at some of the things that I came across in my research, but a lot of it came down to, and me having a teaching background, what can we do in the classroom to protect them? Because ultimately we do spend a lot of time with young people. We are in the business of education, so, quite often young people might not speak about these things at home with their parents. Maybe there's some sort of barrier towards speaking about these things, but at school it tends to come out when they're with their friends, or they'll ask a trusted teacher or something like that. So, it's an opportunity for us to really teach them and have them build that financial capability so that they can make really wise decisions when it does come to them being involved in gambling.
You've nailed it on the head. Gambling is such an accessible thing at the moment. And someone, I'm a very, I always say I do enjoy my video games. I do love the idea of video games, particularly as an adult. Great escape. Really, really, I find it relaxing. And the amount of gambling opportunities that is accessible in these video games, particularly like you said, loot boxes, it's daunting. Even as an adult, there's a lot of push in these games that really highlight, if you pay a bit more, you have a chance. And that itself is gambling. And I don't quote me on the country, but I do know a country in the Northern Hemisphere, they banned the whole idea of loot boxes. So once you've purchased something, everything should be in that product rather than having the chance to get extras and things like that. And a lot of these purchases, you've probably seen from your research, isn't essential material for the game. It's usually, cosmetics or things to add to a character that isn't really essentially needed in the game. So, that's something that I'm quite interested in. And I think that's what drew me to your understanding of gambling, is that's such an evident part that I see, particularly with the kids as well, especially in gaming. I want to talk to you, what are the gambling habits affecting young people, particularly of this generation, and with the data that you've seen and the data that you've collated, what is the data telling us about gambling?
Okay, so if you look at gambling over the last couple of decades, it's really evolved. It used to be that gambling was largely, buying lottery tickets or, going to the RSL or poker machines. But now
the meat raffle.
Yeah, those types of things. Yeah. Actually, raffles is probably one of the first things that people are exposed to as part of gambling. But it's kind of evolved, and I'm sure we've all seen that on our screens with the sports betting. And I know there's been other types of betting. So I actually came across a betting called, and I'm sure you'll laugh at me when I talk about this, because I had to go back and ask my son, and I'm like, have you done this before? Have you been involved? It's called fantasy betting, fantasy
football.
Yes. Where you design like your ideal team and then you get it to play, and you gamble as part of that. I thought that was really interesting.
Fantasy football is huge, absolutely massive.
Yeah, and apparently that's actually one of the biggest areas of gambling. So I'll pull up the data, but essentially, I've done so much research on this, but essentially what we're seeing is a lot of young people becoming involved in that fantasy data. It's actually one of the biggest areas that young people aged below the age of 18 are actually partaking in the fantasy type of football, which is really quite shocking. Our data shows us that 30% of 12 to 17-year-olds, and this is according to the analysis of Australian Sports Commission, a research undertaken by the Australian Institute, that more young people were involved in gambling than they were in, sports. So physically playing sports on a regular basis. So it's really quite alarming, really, and quite often students, because they're still forming their habits around risk, they're not aware that they're putting themselves in a lot of danger for the future. So that really shocked me. But of course, gambling's part of our Australian culture. It's woven into, a lot of our stories about who we are, our cultural identity. You walk past a news agency, you see people waiting to buy scratchies and lottery tickets and those types of things. And according to the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, and this data was collected in 2025, $31.5 billion is spent on gambling every year by Australians, which is the highest figure per capita. So we have a little bit of a problem, and it's not something that our children would be immune from. They are being exposed to it, and you can't turn on the TV without seeing gambling ads. I know there's been some restrictions recently around what times you can actually see those gambling ads, but beyond those restrictions, which were a result of the Peter Murphy report, we still have a lot of exposure of gambling advertising to our children. And so, we look at that as a situation. How do we get past that if our policies are not keeping up with the need to protect our young people? So we kind of need to think more creatively and more strategically around how we protect them if policy and laws are not keeping up with that demand.
Absolutely. And even dialing it back and looking at, like, when does it start? I know when I was young, it was raffle tickets. It was those little, even as an adult, I would say now, innocent moments where you purchase a ticket and it's usually going towards something, some charity, some great organization for funding. Yeah. So you look past that. But I guess, if you look at it black and white, it is gambling. But I guess when we're looking at the purpose of what we're investing that chance into, it's a bit different. And it leads into the next thought I have is, like, when do these gambling patterns occur? What is the gateway gambling affecting children? And maybe I just said one of them, it's the raffles. And I know with kids as well, from what I'm seeing, it's the loot boxes and video games. It's the games that aren't necessarily free. What is the data saying that when are these patterns starting to emerge?
So we're actually seeing it quite young, and a lot of these these games are actually what are teaching those skills and the desire to win. So the way that gambling works is sometimes when you're a new gambler, it might give you lots of small wins initially, and I think it gets the dopamine working and that desire to win, and then eventually, once you're fully locked into gambling, it tends to keep you there for a long time. And so that's when we start seeing some of the problems that are associated. But we can get students to be more alert to some of these manipulative gambling like tactics or dark patterns, as they're called. So websites that coerce and trick users to make purchases or sign up for services, while providing those intermittent rewards and the thrill of near misses, like you almost won, like have another go type thing. And so a lot of our young people tend to internalize these behaviors long before they're able to even recognize the risk. And so we create an occasional win cycle, and habits and the expectations, and, they go into adulthood. And we know that a lot of people's risk taking doesn't stop until quite late in their 20s, and by that stage they're well and truly hooked. Developmentally, adults, I don't believe, are adults until mentally they're well in, by their mid-20s. That's when we start to see the amygdala developed, and before that, these exciting things tend to then become habits, and these habits then turn into problems. And when we live in a society, that is surrounded by family and community. So, when someone does develop a problem, it doesn't just affect them, it affects their families, it affects the community, it affects their workplace. It has such a resounding impact. And what we're starting to see is the fact that we now can have sports gambling so easily and readily available on our phones. We've seen a jump, for example, participation just over the COVID period rose from 5.6% of gambling was sports gambling back in 2015, and that jumped to 9.3% of Australian males placing a bet, and most of those males are aged between 18 and 34. So it's a particular demographic that's really being impacted by that gambling, and we're seeing sports really converge with the other pastime, which is gambling. So you've got like such a stronghold, and then you add on top of that the gaming aspect of it as well. So all of a sudden you've got all these forces that make young people feel like they have to be a part of it, and it takes away a lot of that decision making, and they just end up in a loop and find it very hard to get beyond that. And that really, if you become involved so deeply in the gambling, that really has a strong impact on their financial future, because rather than investing or spending on their needs, it's money that's being wasted and not really used to improve their financial future. And when we see an absence of money in their life, quite often that has an impact on their mental well-being, their physical well-being, just about every type of well-being. So it's really important that we recognise the potential impacts that are happening, and think about what we can do to try and stem that.
Absolutely. And I think as parents, educators, members of community, like, our job is to recognize this, and also recognize it within ourselves, that even if we have a challenge with that, note that and say, hey, hang on, this is the thing. I certainly see it in schools, in the gaming element, particularly when there's a whole element of FOMO. Yeah. For example, if a new game has a release, and to acquire these items you can only have a certain period of time, and if you pay a bit extra you have a higher chance. But it's still, I've seen some of the drop rates, and that's the phrasing that they use for these cosmetics and things like that. Some of them are 1 in 500. They are ridiculous odds. And then eventually, when there's a new update, those items become obsolete and they're not the new fad anymore. So the FOMO is on the new update. And I find that that's how a lot of companies get them. It's the constant updating. It keeps the game relevant. It keeps it fun for them in some respect, but at what cost? And the cost is the FOMO, the constant, I need more. And this connects perfectly to what I want to talk about next, is what are the challenges stemming from these habits? And I think, one of them I just briefly touched on, I guess, is FOMO. It's the fear of, I'm going to miss out now, and I'm going to lose out on everything because I don't have this one thing. But at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter, does it?
Yeah, no, definitely. There's a strong element of FOMO. I'm not sure what that's called in research, but
yeah, there must be some science term for FOMO. Maybe, we can look into that.
But having worked with teenagers, FOMO is the thing. But there are some studies. So there's particularly the Hilda study. So they do a study on problem gambling severity, and they track it on a problem gambling severity index, and they look at things that affect people within our society. And one of the areas that they look at is gambling participation and expenditure, and how that affects them. And really, there's a difference between someone who gambles as a one-off, as part of enjoyment, compared to someone who, has a high problem gambling problem, where we start to see that loss of control, where they start to gamble more than they intended. There's a lot of guilt associated with it, that they're chasing losses. They might borrow from people and then gamble and then, try and recoup those. There's a lot of financial harm, as a result. So they might not be paying their bills on time, or, spending more than they can afford. There's also the emotional and psychological harm, the guilt, the shame, the anxiety, the stress. So, there's a strong mental health aspect associated with it. We've got the social harms, conflict between that person and friends and family, especially if they're borrowing money or even possibly stealing money or lying about money. They could be withdrawing from social activities and social responsibilities that they have, and they could be underperforming at school or at work as a result of their habits. And then we see an increasing riskiness with their gambling behaviours. So they might be starting to bet in larger amounts or more frequently or across different platforms. And they'll do it no matter what the consequences are. So it's really important that we understand what happens before that, and to also recognize it in our young people, because quite often they might be quiet at home and not really say very much, but you might, as an educator in a school, and especially maybe in a high school setting, if they come from a home where there's a lot of gambling issues, or maybe that child has gambling issues, you'll notice certain patterns in their behaviour. They might be more impulsive. They might speak about things in the classroom. So it's really important as educators that we're sort of pushing them in the right direction to seek that help. And usually it's through the wellbeing officers or teachers at the school that we alert, or the school counsellors, so that they can actually talk about it without shame and the stigma associated with it. But also like how we cover, and especially this is very important within the PDHPE syllabus, because you do teach a lot about risk-taking behaviour when it comes to your alcohol, your drugs, your relationships, your can't remember. Yeah, just all the risk-taking areas. And gambling is one of those. So maybe exploring that more deeply in a school setting, like maybe providing some sort of hands-on activity where they actually explore their thinking in that area, so that when they are exposed to it later on, they're able to recognise those elements a bit more, seeing it is becoming more of a problem, for our young people, but also, getting them to think about it in terms of their own financial literacy. Like, what is the impact on you financially? What are you foregoing when you are gambling? Is it just a little bit of fun, or are you jeopardizing your financial future because there's a strong opportunity cost associated with it. But there's also especially a wellbeing cost associated with it, and that's the PDHPE has such a strong emphasis on wellbeing, especially across stages 4 and 5. So making sure that when we're teaching it, we're doing it doing it justice in terms of going deep enough, going far enough, and getting them to actually think critically about it. Before they are affected by it, so that they control the situation, because there's that awareness where they can see where they're being faced with undue influence, or understanding probability. Probability is probably more maths, but understanding that probability, understanding where they can turn to for help fairly early on if they do start gambling and they realize they're starting to lose control. So I think it's really important that we as educators provide them as many opportunities as possible to explore this area. But I feel like it's not just teachers or schools, like, we as an entire educational community really need to look at that. And, what are the different resources that organisations can provide us so that our job is easier. Teachers are under a lot of stress trying to juggle so many things all at once. And, how can we help them as a community so that, they can deliver what's needed for our kids?
Absolutely. And it's, after hearing you talk, it brings me back to a story. I remember when I was working at a high school, one of the earliest questions a high school student, a young man, asked me in year 11 is, so what's your favorite gambling app? And it took me by surprise. I've never downloaded a gambling app. I have no interest in betting or gambling. And I asked the question. There was one student and he just turned 18. I said, oh, this is so exciting. He had his license and things like that. I said, so as an 18-year-old, how do you feel? What are you looking forward to? And he goes, without full confidence, out of shadow of doubt, going to the pub and making some bets. And it just took me by surprise. Like that was a gateway. I remember for us, a gateway was, I remember going to the pub and ordering your first drink, but that was not as big as, remember getting our driver's license and going, driving to McDonald's as soon as we get our driver's license. It's amazing how, gambling is such a gateway now, particularly for men. And it is troublesome and it's challenging as well. And it's funny, as you talk, I've been reflecting on a lot of the things, what have I been especially on, and things, my mum, very big into the lottery, very big into scratchies, and, even as a kid, you get a scratchy, you get a $2 scratchy, I've won $5, and that's really exciting, get your dopamine rush, and you do it again, you're like, oh, I've lost. What I was thinking about as well, Rosette, is that even when it comes to gambling, the dopamine is wild. And it's amazing that when you do see things like poker machines and things like that, there's so many lights and the features are so incredible that when you win, it is such a spectacle. But I can imagine for the first time that's really exciting. As you can tell, I have no gambling experience or winnings. But I can imagine for the first time it would be rather exciting, considering that would be such a significant amount for some people.
Yeah.
But it would wear on them, and they're looking for that next hit. They're looking for that next rush, and like you said, it's worrisome when they're spending thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for that one thing. And it's, what can we do as teachers? What can we do as parents to role model, good habits when it comes to this? Like, how can we demonstrate enough's, and, what can we do to support them when we see these things happening? And not only in teachers, but colleagues and friends, and that are even modeling the wrong thing to students.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of financial capability and learning actually happens at home. We tend to learn our financial habits quite often from our families. And, sometimes it's to our detriment. So I think it starts at home. A parent is a child's first teacher. And and a lot of families do struggle with gambling issues. I think it's really important, for families to talk about money generally. So there's such a stigma across everywhere, talking about money beyond, I bet this much and I made this much in the gambling, or, I invested in this company or this crypto, but also talking about, what are some of the negatives that we're experiencing. So people have a strong shame when they go, oh, look, I lost $2,000 over the weekend. And, kids aren't necessarily seeing those types of things. They might be feeling the consequences of it when there's less money in the household because of a parent's gambling habit, but they're not necessarily seeing the reasons behind it. And so what they do see is the celebration when that happens, very infrequently, but when it does, it's celebrated, it's talked about, but they're not seeing where parents are talking about, look, I am going to gamble today, but I've put a budget of $50 to be able to gamble, and I'm not going to go over that. So they're not talking about it enough, perhaps, in terms of putting restrictions around it or putting it as part of a budget. Rather, it's all about the language around the winning and the, putting a bet or having a go, or, those types of things, or having a flutter, or, getting dressed up to attend a Melbourne Cup party, or those types of things. They're seeing all these positive things associated with gambling. They're seeing, their favourite sports people advertising gambling. They're not seeing, the dad that, is so anxious and guilty about their habits, or the mum that might be disengaged from the household because they've got a secret habit that they've got, or the fact that they can't pay the electricity bill when it comes in. So I think we generally, when we're talking about financial literacy, we really need to talk about money more. We don't need to share with people how much we're making, but we can talk about our struggles with it, and our kids can actually learn a lot from that, especially when it's very... we're not talking about burdening children with our problems, but talking about it more generally so that they see the good and the bad, not just the celebration from gambling, which is quite often what happens, but also, if we don't have those habits ourselves, say our financial literacy or capability, and I want to just draw a distinction between financial literacy and financial capability. So when we're talking about financial literacy, we're really talking about understanding the elements of, budgeting, saving, all those types of things, investing. But when we're talking about financial capability, we're talking about all those things plus our ability to make wise decisions and critical decisions around it. And that's why I sort of veer towards more the capability, because it's really a type of confidence that's grounded in being able to make decisions according to the situation. And that's what we want to develop in our kids. It's not just about content, because content changes over time, especially when we're talking about, some of the financial elements that we're seeing now and we'll see into the future. Like when I was a teenager, we didn't have cryptocurrency. We traded. I learned how to share trade using a newspaper, Yeah, so, they're having to deal with a lot more complex things compared to us. So really, it's not just about giving them the information, but getting them to think for themselves so that they can make those decisions. Like, getting them to think, like, if I spend $1,000 gambling because it feels good in the moment, that's $1,000 that I'm not investing. And so, in 30 years' time, when I choose to retire, I won't have that compounded investment, using that money. So getting them to think critically and to really step back and not make decisions based on what feels good and emotions and those types of things. So, it's a very different, it's a different skill set.
Yeah, and I think what struck me, what you just said then, is the difference between the literacy and the capability. And I think that's a very, very, very powerful point that you've made. Is it's the idea of knowing what it is, and then the idea of knowing what to do with that understanding of financial literacy. And it's funny when you were mentioning the newspapers. We were big traders of food. What was valued a bag of Kettle's chips? Was it a buttered roll? Was it some chicken schnitzel strips? It was fantastic. It was all about trading and value and understanding of value as well. And back when I was a kid, we used to trade Pokemon cards as well. When that was starting and emerging, it was when I was a kid, it's that long ago. And it's understanding value as well. It's now what I love what you do, and for all the teachers listening, this is the free program, and I know teachers, you love free stuff. I love free stuff as well. And for all the people that read educational posts on social media, the comment section is wonderful, and they're saying, we need to teach kids financial literacy. Look no more, friends, because we're going to talk about the Talk Money program and financial literacy for children. Now, Rosette, you know all about this. You spearhead this. So what is this? What is this Talk Money program?
So Talk Money is the program that we offer through Ecstra Foundation. Teachers can book in through the Talk Money website to have us come out and run workshops at your school. These programs are very interactive. They're very much pitched at a student's level. They're curriculum aligned, very much tied to wellbeing. So we actually see a lot of PDHPE teachers are the ones that are reaching out and actually having us come to schools to talk about money and how to manage money. But I think also beyond that, we need to think about what are we doing beyond just the workshops. So we provide also a whole heap of resources, so fact sheets. We have worksheets so that teachers can use to be able to enhance what we provide. So we provide worksheets around the Talk Money program, but there's also additional worksheets that you can use in the classroom. We also have a competition which works really well as an assignment. So we did do a revamp of the assessment, or not the assessment, the competition recently, so that it is more in line with, perhaps running it at your school as a learning opportunity. What we find is a lot of young people are starting to use social media more and more to get their financial literacy, and quite often
Absolutely.
that lovely risk-taking behaviour, and not all
That's
of it is credible.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And a lot of it is quite biased, like, come and invest with us, just ignore all our, statistics about how we performed over the years, or the fact that we only opened yesterday. Yeah, so young people are getting their financial information from TikTok. So we need to, be able to provide for schools to be able to mitigate that in a way and get students to think more critically. So what we've done at Ecstra Foundation, our Talk Money program has a competition, and it'll come out in the next couple of weeks, and you do have a long period of time that you can actually run it and then put in your entries. But essentially, students will do some sort of learning around a financial literacy aspect. So it could be that they do research around gambling mums, or a type of gambling, and getting people to understand that a bit more, and then develop an artifact that they can share with the community, and that's what they actually put in as their entry in the competition. So it could be a TikTok video, it could be a podcast, it could be an Instagram, what are those scrolly things, the reels, I think. No, the reels are the videos.
The carousels.
Carousel, that's it. It could be a carousel, it could be a sketch, it could be anything, comics, but an artifact that teaches others about that financial literacy aspect. So they're forced to think critically, and we've got guidelines around what they should consider. So, we've scaffolded it for teachers. So teachers can actually just take the materials that we've developed on the website and actually turn it into an assessment task, for example. Excellent. Into PDHPE. Excellent. And students either in groups or by themselves can create an entry, and we've got some pretty big prize money. When I say big prize money for a young person, yes, that they can actually put their entry in and they could possibly win. So, we've tried to help teachers out as much as possible with that.
And we need a lot of help, a lot of support. I love it. And I think this ties in really, really well because I do a lot of K-6 PDHPE, and we've got a brand new syllabus coming next year. And I know the school that I'm at the moment, we've started planning for it. And there is a component in stage 3 where it does look at financial literacy. That is a new dot point in the syllabus where we're looking at essentially the impact of finances on health and well-being. And in a nutshell, it looks like it looks at if you have more financial literacy and capability, and the word capabilities there, does it mean that you have a better opportunity to enhance and maintain good levels of mental health and physical health, which as people, we know that's true, but also we need to remind kids that it is a very important that spending money, the world is about spending money, we know that, but it's not about spending at every opportunity for impulsive decisions. And when I was growing up, and probably the same as you, Rosette, is that saving was a huge thing. Do you remember, back in the day, I remember my first financial experience was when I signed up for my Dolomite account. Do you remember that?
Yes, we all had those Dolomite accounts.
Many years ago, and you had your bank book, and you'd go in and you deposit and you write it down in the bank book. That was my initial financial lessons. And to this day, I still look at it and giggle. But, in the day of 2026, when, finance and how you can accumulate finances and money and where you can spend it is much more broad than what we had. I think stuff like this is really, really important. So let's talk takeaway things, resources. Is there anything for the Talk Money program or anything that you would recommend for resources to support the syllabus, the old one, the new one, and how we can use things like the Talk Money program to engage our students moving forward?
Absolutely. So again, the Talk Money program, recommend you bring us out as a workshop, maybe as a hook to the unit or whatever program that you're running. Whatever stage you're at, and you could do the Financial Literacy in Action Awards as part of your assignment, looking at a particular aspect that's relevant to your subject area. You can have a look at the worksheets, the fact sheets on our website, but there's also other resources that you could use. So Gamble Aware has some really great resources around gambling awareness, and I'm sure a lot of teachers use those already. And there's a lot of state-based ones as well. There's also NESA has a whole suite of learning materials that they're developing as well that we could use within the classroom, no matter what our subject area is, which is fantastic. You can also develop your own. So, I know in a lot of schools you might have some sort of inquiry-based learning that you run, or some project-based learning. You could do some learning around that, where students actually practice a lot of, these financial literacy concepts in a controlled environment, which is fantastic. And there are free resources that you can use to develop that financial capability. I know Money Smart has some really fantastic resources around financial education. There's the Financial Basics Foundation has really great programs, online programs. They also have an easy money game, which is a game essentially where students simulate being an adult, and they get scammed, they get jobs, they upskill, they do all those things in a simulated type of environment. It's actually quite addictive, I must admit, having used that in the classroom over the years, but it is for a good cause. It teaches a lot of really great skills. There's also the ASX School Share Market game provides some really great resources. The ATO provides some fantastic resources as well that are curriculum aligned. Yeah, so there's so many resources out there that are for free to use. And quite often I do speak to lots of different teachers. I have presented at quite a few workshops for professional associations. There's a lot around financial literacy, including gambling literacy out there. It's just a matter of finding it or it finding you. And I think, Andre, yourself being a part of a professional association, what professional associations provide to teachers is amazing. Like there's so many resources that we make available. We're always advocating for certain things. We're running a lot of the courses that really enhance what teachers provide and keep them updated. So, we have a part to play as professional associations in being able to provide those things. But also, teachers learn a lot by becoming involved. So, as you would know, being part of a professional association and becoming involved in providing the learning, that actually enhances your own learning because it pushes you to learn so much more to be able to give back. So, and that becomes like a bigger gift to you in a lot of ways because, you're learning far more out of, that process. So,
absolutely.
There's a lot of ways you can access learning that's specific to your subject area.
Yeah. Gosh, I am the last person you need to convince about professional learning. I am at any opportunity going through some sort of PD course for anything that I can tie in some form of relevance to PDHPE. Absolutely. Roset, this has just been a treat, an absolute treat. If you're a stock, I'd certainly invest in you. This has been fantastic. I remember years ago, gosh, I'll tell you a quick story. I remember years ago when I did business studies in 11 and 12, one of my favorite subjects, as a PE teacher, I remember so fondly of my business studies teacher, my business studies class. It was just incredible. And I know I'm a PE specialist, but I'll also credit my legal studies teacher. That was a great, wonderful subject as well. But I remember we did the ASX stock exchange competition, and I remember how much fun we had just on discussing, like researching the companies, researching the shares, researching the whole idea, like what a share is and how that influences, corporate decision making and product investment. It was fantastic. So there's so much into it. But one question before we go. As a teacher, what was your beverage of choice? As you can see, I've got my coffee. This is number three today. What was your drink of choice when you're in the classroom? What were you regularly known for?
I really love coffee as well, but as a teacher, you know that the coffee gets cold really, really quickly because you forget it in the staff room while you're running to your next class or whatever.
Absolutely.
So I actually love a good kombucha. You couldn't see this. I had this to the side, but I always had a few of these in the fridge at work, and really great after lunch. I think they've got like 8 calories for a can, which is fantastic as well.
But apparently 1 billion probiotics. So the numbers are there.
And you get a fizzy drink. That's sweet.
Oh, and I think the can size is respectable as well. It's not ideal, but I do respect the size. Roset, thank you so much for your time. Now, if there's anyone who's listening, which I'm sure many people are, they want to work with the Talk Money program. They want to get invested. They want to get involved. How about do they go about booking some time with the Talk Money program? Where do they go?
So they can actually find information on by going to Talk Money. So www.talkmoney.org.au, and there's a little tab at the top that says book workshop, and you just type in the information, and our team will get in contact with you so that we can come out to your school. There's also a tab at the top that says resources. And then there's also information on our competition there as well. So, everything that you need, all on the Talk Money website. If you would like to contact me, because I deal quite often with different organisations, you can find me on LinkedIn. Otherwise, if you go to Ecstra Foundation, our website, and that website is www.extra is spelled ECSTRA.org.au, and then it's got a section that says contact. Just fill in the contact and it'll come through to me, and I'm happy to chat about all things financial literacy, financial capability, or even gambling as a part of financial capability. So yeah, I'd love to.
Excellent.
I'd love to speak to your members and get them developing amazing learning.
Excellent. And I can put all that information in our show notes as well, so they can just look at the episodes, click the links, and go straight into it. Fantastic, Roset. Again, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. I've got a lot of takeaways from this as well. A lot of great memories as well of certain things as well. I remember trading gum nuts. I remember trading Hot Wheels cars. Yes. Gosh, that brings me back. Yeah, gum nuts and Hot Wheels cars. They were investments, some would say. The Hot Wheels cars, investments. Do you know you can get, just quickly before we go, do you know there's vending machines now with like Hot Wheels and Matchbox cars?
Yes, I've seen that. What a good idea. What a great business model.
Oh, absolutely. Just the whole idea of just anything in vending machines. Everyone, my name is Andre. You've been listening to Roset, and this is the PDHPE Pulse podcast. We will catch you later.